to another edition of the UMOJA Circle. My name is Keith Smokey Johnson, and for those of you who are new to this show, the purpose of the UMOJA Circle is basically, when it comes to people of African descent, to correct errors where errors are found, and to introduce fact where we find that so many people are working on fiction when it comes to who we are as a people. And that fiction kind of affects how our day-to-day lives, our interactions in the society helps us as citizens or not. You know, we have a perspective and a point of view, and we have a unique history in America, and a unique way of seeing the world. A lot of times, we are our point of view is like put on the side or on a footnote when things are being expressed. Most of the things that are expressed of interaction socially, politically, economically, usually come from the dominant group of what is considered white America. Last show, I talked about race, and the title of the show is about race and politics, based on what I saw happening in states like Georgia, where you had the candidate Kemp, who was opposing Stacey Abrams for the governorship of Georgia, and what happened also in Florida with Brother Andrew Gillum, both who were on a roll throughout the campaign and were picking up momentum and voters, most black, whites, Latino, that represent the most of those two states that would have been historical, especially in Georgia, if Stacey Abrams, who is a black woman, if she became governor, and it looked like she was on the path to that, but nothing is guaranteed. And what we're but there was actual, and what I think is in the courts now, the person who won, Kemp, he was also the Secretary of State of Georgia, and he had a conflict of interest. He was also the person opposing her for that position as governor of the state of Florida under the Republican Party. And in the last couple of years, slowly but surely, starting back in, I think, 2013, when part of the Voting Rights Act, which was the most important part, was overturned. I think it was Section 4 or 5, I think Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which required any state, especially states that had a history of voter suppression, that's usually the Confederate states, ex-Confederacy like Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida. They had a tendency through their actions for well over 150 years at the end of the Civil War and the end of Reconstruction of the taking away the voting rights, or not allowing the people of African descent or people of color like Native Americans, who didn't get their rights as citizens until 1924 in this country, you see, and other people of colors like our Latino brothers and sisters. So the browns, the black, the red people in this country did not live under the same, even the words were there. Last show I expressed the fact that I looked at the words in the Declaration of Independence, especially those parts that said all men are created equal and endowed by the Creator with inalienable rights, you know, and with that, rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So that's the mission statement of America. The Constitution was the structure that was created in 1789 to carry out the mission statement that was found in the 1776 founding document or idea or ideal that was supposed to be followed by this country for all those who consider themselves citizens. Yes, back then, the only citizens who had any right were male property owners. Even male non-property owners couldn't couldn't even vote until somewhere in the early 1800s. But each group, that's part of what we call the American experience here, or the cost of being American citizens, or the rights of American citizens, that you get these liberties. Okay, liberties are not even though it's given by the Creator naturally, it's given to a person by law in this country, and we got to understand that truth, that we, and politics is the means by which we get those liberties. And if that's not, if there's no laws in place, then the liberty does not exist for us. And even if there is a law, those laws got to be carried out. And one thing that we have to understand about a culture that is embedded with racism as the American culture is, and that's another one of things that people in a dominant group do not want to face yet. Some do. We have people who are anti-racist type of advocates like Tim Weiss, and there's a couple of others that go around as white men and women who get it. They understand that even if you are white, if you don't wake up from this delusion of separatism, of dominance, you're not helping yourself. You're not going to deal well with the reality that you're facing. That's facing many middle class and lower middle class white Americans who still believe in the mythos of white supremacy, that somehow white America are smarter or better educated. That's all, they're human beings, they're citizens, and all human beings in reality are the same. But we still have a mythos that a lot of people, especially in the South, not only in the South, but compared to what I saw in this last governor race in Georgia, and what happened in Florida, and what was attempted to happen in places like Kansas, or I think was in the Dakotas, where the legislators tried to manipulate the laws so that Native Americans who voted predominantly Democratic did not try to do it so that they could not be able to register. And these things that we think is something unique to the Trump administration, I'm here to tell you, and that's why the title of the show states that this is old techniques that's been going on, and we have been experiencing as people of color for almost not only 240 something years of the American Democratic Republic that it was established in 1776 and confirmed in 1789 with the ratification of the Constitution, but it's been around going back way back into colonial times, and the people who benefit from this system, well, we're white, but they were a small majority of white. That's the dominant group, the group at the top of the social economic system, the elites. It was those elites in colonial America, colonial Virginia, the House of Burgesses, in Virginia, that who created the laws, who became the politicians, or backed a particular kind of politician that benefited by law their interests. And when they saw that the masses of the people, people don't realize, let me backtrack a little bit, that there was no such concept of white men for, totally in early colonial times. They saw themselves as English, they saw themselves as German, they saw themselves as Italian, or, Spaniards, Portuguese, whatever in Europe. They saw themselves as, and they were fighting each other for thousands of years. The French and the English, hated each other. So there's nothing unique. So they would do horrible things to each other. But when it came to this country, and because of the politics and the economical process, which needed gang labor if you were a tobacco planter, or or a rice planter, or sugar in the Caribbean, you had to control, and you maintain your wealth, like the upper 1%, the corporate entities of that time, just like today. You had to manipulate the masses of the people, distract them from the fact that you're sending your jobs overseas to make more profit. But then you blame the brown, the black, and whoever else that is other to justify the actions. You condition generations of poor whites to believe that they have opportunities, the American dream kind of thing. But the system is geared to benefit those who put the laws together. And if you don't understand that, it's only as a group of people that unite, that's when you can make sure that these changes come that benefit the group, and find the type of policymakers who will work for you, who will do the things that you need to do in order to make sure that life, liberty, and your ability for the pursuit of happiness by having a good job or having good education. That does not, the elites will never do that for you. They'll tell you they'll do that. That's politicians are wordsmiths. They use words as their job. They know how to trigger words. You think that these people who come up with these policies, the people that represent you, the senators and the congressmen, or the state representatives, or the state senators, or the governors, or the mayors, all these people have advisors. And what I'm understanding, whose interests are going to have those people in power's ear are the interest group. One of the things that Hamilton, who was one of the proponents of the Constitution, in order to justify, they wrote certain essays. There's another set of writings called the Federalist Papers. There are about 80-something essays, 85 or so, written by Hamilton and Madison and John Jay. And they went under the pseudonym of Publius. It was a technique that was used. They were the Federalists, and you had the Anti-Federalists, who had their essays in the newspapers going against the Constitution, which they feared was reestablishing another kind of monarchy. One-man president. Was equivalent to them to the kings and queens of Europe. And then they just fought a war, a revolution, to get rid of that. Okay. Winston Churchill said that democracy is the worst form of government, is a bad form of government. But he said, compared to all the other forms of government that human beings have put together so far, it is the best thing going. So this mythology that democracy works for everybody, with it's like I said, it's a mission statement. And your mission is to carry out certain things. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Each generation's mission is to find laws that fits the time and fits the demographic, so that that group that exists in America, whether in the 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, or the 20th century, or the 21st century, you still have to make sure that those laws work for the evolving population. When the founding fathers established this system, this democratic republic, they could not even imagine an America of over 300 million people. It was beyond their capabilities. But they created a structure through the Constitution. The mission statement was established in 1776, and the structure was established in 1789 with the ratification of the Constitution. And we still are working on it. And its political system was established so that it can maintain and expand and ease the trauma of multiple groups vying for either power or their rights to express life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And it's a perpetual thing. It just didn't establish in 1789 and then you let you don't just start a car and get it moving and then you leave the car and it moves. It's going to cause chaos. You got to have guidance. And the guidance and the interests of all these interest groups who are supposed to keep each other in check is how this system works. And it's not a perfect system, especially if you're people of color. When the system was established for predominantly white men and predominantly rich white men so that they could gain the economic wealth so that they could live and have the pursuit of life, liberty, to enhance their happiness, okay, and greed. And the founding fathers understood that humans tend to gather in groups, interest groups. Okay, so what's going on today with the obvious racism of Donald Trump and his administration is nothing new. It goes back to the beginning of this country. We just got to understand that the mythology says that you just got to be an American citizen, and then once you're an American citizen, you can sit back and the system is supposed to work. No, it does not work that way. You have to understand your power as a citizen in voting. You have to understand that the powers of other groups are going to try to take, when one thing you got to understand, when we talk about white privileges, for example, and we say about racism, and we say that we are denied as people of African descent or Native Americans, okay, that we have documents that show that in the year such and such, 8 million racist acts in housing was done. Well, those people who were denied the housing, those 8 million housing, well, somebody filled up that vacuum. Somebody in another group is going to benefit from the vacating of the rights of, say, black people from housing throughout the country. Well, those housing, because are going to be filled by whatever group is allowed into those systems. And if there's laws that give that group rights to do certain things and denies another group rights or pursue their happiness, well, that's how America has been functioning since 1789. Actually, since the beginning of the 1600s and the 1500s. So we got to understand the reality. People of African descent, people of color know this because they had to deal with the trauma of running into the society. I want to show a picture. I want to reinforce what I'm saying, that this system was not coincidental. I want to use somebody from modern time, a recent modern time. He died in 1991, but he was part of the Reagan, which is the gold standard for the Republican conservatives, and Nixon, and he enhanced. Last time I talked about the Southern strategy. Okay, I talked about it was a process that came out in the time of Nixon, and I showed this map in the last show. This map showed the Southern United States, or the ex-Confederacy, all right? And as you can see, the term the Southern strategy refers to Richard Nixon and Republican Party's electoral strategy during the 1968 presidential election to increase support among white voters in the South by appealing to their racial fears and what have you. In fact, they just say, we ignore the black vote, we ignore the brown vote. We ought to maybe get 10, 20% of those, maybe. We don't care. We focus on white votes. We're gonna let them, we'll gin up their racism, we'll gin up their racial fears and their white fragility about losing what their parents had and what their great-grandparents had, and we'll point our finger at the black and the brown and the red and all these other groups and say it's them. And this strategy has been part of Republican politics, 1968, that's 50 years. They've been ahead of the game 50 years, and nothing is new. Like what went on in Florida and what went on in Georgia. It was voter suppression, pure and simple. What just happened in Mississippi, where we had an obvious Confederate sympathizer in the new Senate race runoff, and her statements about lynching, and she would rather whoever she was talking about, she said she's such a close friend of his, that she would sit right next to him at a lynching. And to her it was nothing. It was just a old Southern sentiment, but Mississippi, which has a terrible, terrible history of doing those things to people that look like me. Not only black men, but black women or young children, okay? Because we have a tendency, white America has a tendency of looking at our 13, 14, 15-year-old black boys, children, as adults. Tamir Rice, the example. He was like 11 or 12 and wasn't even given an opportunity. He was playing with a gun, a toy gun, like cops and robbers, like I did when I was 11 or 10 with my friends. And a cop pulled up, didn't see an 11-year-old child, just saw a black person with a gun, and shot him within seconds of getting out the car without even saying anything. Okay? If that was a white 11-year-old kid, there would be a total outrage. Black folks were outraged, but their voice, again, are not being heard. Okay? That white privilege of oblivion. One thing about white privilege, and the fact that even you could go to your home in suburbia, white suburbia, and be oblivious to what's happening in south side of Chicago, or what's happening in other poor neighborhoods, even in poor white neighborhoods. With these opioid type of phenomenon that's destroyed white middle-aged people who are numbing themselves from facing the reality that what was promised as the American dream, when you had horizontal mobility, if you didn't have vertical mobility, where your grandfather had a job in the factory, your father had a job in the factory, you had a job in the factory, but now those factory jobs are going overseas. Robots are taking over a lot of these factories. So all these realities, so the American dream that you were told since colonial time, that if you follow us and you deny all those people who are taking your jobs, I don't know what black person was taking the job of a indentured white person in the cotton fields during that period of time. They were both there picking cotton regardless. Same thing with factory workers. Black people did not own the factories that were sent overseas. It's still those white elites who've been ginning them up. The person who really kind of epitomized, and his techniques, even though he died in 1991 at the age of 40, was a person by the name of Lee Atwater. I think I have a couple of images of him. I want to talk about him before I go. Lee Atwater was another political consultant and strategist for the Republican Party. He was an advisor to both President Reagan and George H.W. Bush. He also was the chairman of the Republican National Committee. Atwater aroused controversy through his aggressive and oftentimes purely racist ads. In other words, he's the father of what today we call negative campaigning, okay? The hidden racisms of the commercials you might see, or the political ads that you see even to this day in this past midterm elections. You see a lot of these hints of hidden racisms. Lee Atwater, going way back in the 80s, under Reagan. So this man, as a strategist, had the air of powerful men. The next image I want to show you, a powerful man he was next to. Look who he's standing in there. Okay, Lee Atwater and the current person who occupies the president's office. All right, white males who are in political power, who creates laws and decisions that affect your day. There's not a thing that you do as a human being, whether it's go to the grocery store or buy a car or drive a highway, or even the air you breathe. It's a law that is passed that regulates that. And whose interests that law expresses will determine how you will function, whether you are pursuing life, liberty, or the pursuit of happiness. And the way black people and brown people and Native Americans have been treated in this country, it's not working for us a lot. So that's why we protest. I want to show one more picture. I want that just to show you that I'm not kidding when I said this man was with the power. You got Reagan. You see the cockiness of him in the 1980s, right? And Bush 1 and Bush 2. He was there with all of them, advising all of them, running this country. And before I go, I want to read something that he wrote when he was hit with a brain tumor before he died, a month before he died. Okay, in February of 1991. My illness helped me to see that what was missing in me, a little heart, a lot of brotherhood. The 80s were about acquiring wealth, power, prestige. I know I acquired more wealth, power, and prestige than most. But you can acquire all you want and still feel empty. What power wouldn't I trade for a little more time with my family? What price wouldn't I pay for an evening with friends? It took a deadly illness to put me eye to eye with that truth. But it is a truth that this country, caught up in its ruthless ambitions and moral decay, can learn on my dime. I don't know who will lead us through the 90s, but they must be made to speak to this spiritual vacuum at the heart of American society, the tumor of the soul. And with that, I want to say peace, hotep, bye-bye.